Today, kids are playing less, and there's a bevy of reasons, but is that having an impact on their education and their mental health? On the other side. Welcome back to another episode of the South Star Classroom. I'm Charles, that's David, and David has a great topic for us. He's leading the day, brother. So let's pass you the festivities. Let's switch these screens. There you go, brother.
Sounds good. Thank you very much, Charles. Hello, everybody. Thanks for being here today. We are at episode, if you can believe it or not, and we still haven't ran out of topics to talk about because there's always something out there worthy of our time and your time. Episode 144. Today we are going to be focused on the importance of play, and it's a timely subject considering where we're heading into in terms of making the transition from the school year into summer. But we're going to talk about the school year as well. So we're going to be talking about play today. But we'll get more into that. Why don't we go ahead and do a quick check-in? I know you've been on the road, Charles. Yes. And so how have things been?
Things have been great, man. Now that I'm back home, it's been about 3 states in like 4 or 5 days. First was Memphis, and had these dinners to talk about the state of education in Memphis and just, what's happening there. And we had this incredible just showing from the community. It was so great. Shout out to Sarah Carpenter and the Memphis Lift, and even as she was grieving her own daughter, still made sure we got the VIP treatment there and just learned a lot of stuff. I mean, there's a project that you and I are working on, and I can't wait for us to both share learnings across those tables. We get to do some cool work. And then Oakland, we had our yearly report come out, and I probably should do something about it on the show next week. It's some really good data from these young people, and it's called Proficiency Over Pageantry. It's our 2023-24 Oakland report, and one of the largest findings was our young people reached out and talked to almost 350 students, and about 80% of those students thought that they were on track as far as English and math proficiency. I don't know why my screen keeps doing that, but it's fine. It's gonna freeze when I do that. But what we learned was 80% of those kids thought they were proficient, whereas only about 20%, especially the Black kids in Oakland, are reading on grade level. So being able to talk about that, have some discussion, illuminate some things, fire up a community, it was just really cool. And the report came out pretty beautiful, man. I'm tired now, but I'm happy to be here talking to my brother. How are you?
Good, man. Good. Yeah, I can't wait to see that. Is the report public yet?
Yeah, it's public. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Great. I'll look out for it. Yeah, it's been busy, but most of my school-based clients are either are out of school, or they're going to be out of school, or they're just like running around like chickens with their heads cut off. Super busy time of the year for them. So it's been good. A little bit of downtime, but also it's nice to see the school year end for particular students going into from elementary into middle school, from middle school into high school, and high school into life. So I always appreciate all the graduation festivities. And we talked about it last week on the show, but just seeing the legacy of a lot of the work that I did and that we did in Oakland, and seeing many of those schools still thriving and serving young people. I think we don't live in Oakland anymore, but both you and I definitely, have left a mark in the town, right?
I thoroughly agree. Agree. Yeah. And that was always one of the interesting conversations. And people were like, do you miss Oakland? And I love Oakland. I love Oakland forever. But I think Oakland left me long before I moved out of Oakland. And so the Oakland that I grew up in is very, very different. I'm sure the one that you grew up teaching in and building schools in feels a little different these days as well. So
definitely, absolutely. And so, yeah, what else? Let's see. Before we get into the topic, feels like we're definitely heading back into this like election cycle. So we should probably do a show coming up here about the upcoming presidential election. Already starting to see the wheels are falling off the bus, man. People are just, people are starting to freak out a little bit.
well,
So,
I mean,
it's going to happen.
that's how it goes, man. I mean, listen, we got this through November. I think it's going to be interesting. There's going to be hot takes. There's going to be, black men are ruining the Democratic Party, or what's going on with brown people, and it's about to get real cut up, and every word is about to be parsed. We're about to hear over and over, and I'm not trying to offend nobody by this statement, but I've heard this for every election of my lifetime. This is the most important election of all time. I don't know if you can just keep using that every single time. I say that as a poli-sci major, as somebody who worked for the Democratic Party, and just as a human being, I just feel like just had the decency to sell me on something different, either party.
Please.
Just not the same thing. And I know, but we're in this time where you say anything that does not seem supportive of the person or the cause that somebody else feels for, then you're automatically evil. And listen, man, there's real evil in the world. And so you keep conflating everything. You keep crying wolf when one shows up. Nobody's gonna listen to you. So it'll be interesting.
Right.
We got some time in between now and the election, but I'm sure between you, me, and especially Omar, the political freaks here, I'm sure we'll probably have a few conversations about it.
Yep. And there was I was gonna put the show out today, but we'll push it back maybe to next month. The two candidates, Biden and Trump, are going to be releasing soon their kind of their policy platforms, right? And so I think what we should do is we should pull out the education platforms and have a conversation about that. I got some interesting polling data that I've been looking at around education issues and presidential elections. So I think it'll be fascinating. We should do that.
I think so as well, man. And let me know if you get an echo or anything. But I have my monitors up pretty loud. But man, I'm with it, man. I'm with it. So this topic that we got, man, like what sparked it? Like what are we talking about?
Yep. Yeah. So I think what sparked it was an article that just had come out about a study that had been completed about a year ago. And I think we often talk about the academic side of the house, and what's happening in the classroom, in the buildings. A couple of weeks ago, we talked about technology and cell phones and social media, and how that's kind of changed the lives of young people today in 2024. And so this is kind of a companion piece to that. This study that we're going to be we're not going to dissect it, but we're going to talk about it for sure. Is kind of a call regarding the importance of play, and play meaning not necessarily structured, can be unstructured time for young people to move physically, to explore, to dissect things with their hands, right? Literally to like chop trees down, to run after birds, all these things that we I don't know what it was like when you were growing up. I know you grew up in.
We can definitely talk about it, man. I think that's gonna be the funnest part of the episode.
Yeah, for sure. So let me pull up the big ideas here from the article. And I had a freak out this morning because ChatGPT was down, and I was like, "What am I going to do? I'm going to have to read this. I'm going to have to read this whole thing."
It got back up a few hours after, but yeah.
So the psychologist's name is Peter Gray, and the name of the study, which was from last year, is called "More School and Less Play is Making Children Depressed." It's pretty blunt, right? And it's very blunt. So 5 big ideas from the study, emphasizing the importance of play. Peter Gray emphasizes that unstructured play is crucial for children's mental health, helping them acquire life skills, make friends, and learn to direct their own activities. I have a lot to say about this when we get into the conversation, just based on the time that I spent as a TK through 8 head of school in a Montessori public charter school, where self-direction was like a big thing for us, right? Number 2, the decrease in play. So since the 1960s, children's opportunities for free play have overall declined, coinciding with increased levels of anxiety, depression, and suicide among youth, right? Less play, more anxiety. Less play, more depression. Historical norms. Historically, children have had more freedom and independence, which Gray argues is essential for their development. Modern restrictions are unprecedented and harmful. When we get there, I did look up some statistics, which I'll share. But being a child in 2024 isn't that much safer or less safe than it was 30 or 40 years ago. It's like we got this thing into our minds. You got to protect the kids. They can't walk to school or back. The world is a dangerous place, right? That's not what the data says. The role of the school, number 4, the increased emphasis on structured activities and extended school hours has reduced children's free time. So that means school year's longer, the school day has gotten longer, and now we have these after school programs that go up until 6 p.m. sometimes. And so that's kind of taking away time for children to actually have what's called free time, right? And then screen time misconceptions. The author argues that concerns about screen time are misplaced, and the lack of independent play and excessive adult oversight are more significant factors affecting children's well-being. So he's kind of saying, like, let's focus less on the screen time issue, and we really need to be focusing on adult oversight and the lack of independent play opportunities for young people. So those are 5 big ideas that I pulled from the study. And let's see, we have questions here. I think so. We should. Let's see. Or we could. Let me get your quick take on that, Charles. High level.
High level. I think kids definitely play less. I put a court up in over my garage, right, on my house, and the amount of, I just would have expected, like, I have cameras around my house. So one day I was gone and my camera thing is going off, and there's some kids, just shooting on it, kind of scared, but shooting on it. So I can talk through my camera, and they got scared. I just was watching them for a little bit, but I was like, your jumper's broke. And they was like, where'd that voice come from? But I was like, man, y'all can keep playing. It's fine. Go, like, have fun. Yeah. Like, don't, respect the crib, but like, don't, but have fun. Cause I just don't see kids out playing in the same way. So I think it's really interesting. I used to have a lot of fun. As a kid, and really poor. Like, and you used to hear those old stories about the 50s. I think about the old man with the tire and the stick, but like, we really did play games like tag or ball tag, or like, go play basketball or play football, or, we had an imagination and that's wherever I lived. Like, wherever you live, you use the elements. So, And when I lived in Kentucky with my grandmother and it was snow, it was great. We had a snow day. We had these epic snowball fights. We just, we used to be outside so much that our parents used to kind of be like, hey, you keep coming in and out the house, you're going to stay in the house. And having to stay in the house was a punishment. Like, that was you didn't want that. And I think now it's like,
that's right.
You tell a kid to go outside, it's a punishment. And I think, that's where the term "go touch grass" is coming from. I'm about to I'm reading this book. I just started it. I'm not anywhere like in it yet. I was stretching because we saw our brother Omar was coming in. He was fixing his hair. I wanted to give him some time. You look good, but the book is called The Anxious.
What's up, everybody?
Hey, man. The book is called The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt. I haven't read it yet, but it seems to
be like my computer's freezing up as well.
Oh, well, you have a huge delay, but it's all good. We got you. David got you. Go ahead.
Yeah, you got a delay. You might want to maybe hop off and try to come back on.
Yep, I will do so.
Okay.
Give me a minute.
All right, cool.
Yeah. So Jonathan Haidt.
Yeah. So that's
how that
interesting that you're
goes.
reading that. I think here we go. Let's see. Yeah, I mean, my quick take, like none of this is a surprise for me. I haven't gone in to actually read the study, which I plan to, because this stuff is really interesting to me. But his concern about his comments about our concerns about screen time being misplaced. I'm more curious to like get into that and see what lays under that. But yeah, I mean, I think our society has completely changed. The way we live. We've become, as a society, just more anxious in general, as people, as parents. I think we're trying to do a good thing by protecting our kids. We don't want them out on the streets. And I think, we can get into that a little bit more, because that looks different in different parts of the country, different parts of the city. I think, the connection between the body and the mind and the spirit are definitely like things that I'm thinking about. And when one of those three are not being catered to and or nurtured, you have an imbalance, right? And that's why we're seeing the elevated numbers in terms of depression and anxiety with young people, just because it's not just about movement either. Like I believe in rigorous academic classes. And whenever I was a principal, I also was a strong believer and supporter in rigorous PE or rigorous recess, right? And that meant like kids had to show up on time, in uniform, ready for PE. The teacher had to have a lesson plan that included, a warm-up activities, a structured activity that would engage all students. Accountability. So like no kids get, you just have those couple kids that like to sit out a PE, and they just kind of let them coast. And I'm like, nobody's sitting out. Everybody's got to be moving their bodies. Right. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, this, Omar, if you'd like, I put the 5 big ideas in the chat for you.
Okay.
If you can see those, but yeah, we're just talking about this, the study that came out about the, raising the issue and the concern of reduced, unstructured, I would call it play and exploration time for young people, and the rise in anxiety and depression amongst young people. So we haven't gotten to the school component yet, but we will.
As he's catching up, I was gonna say, he's catching up and going over and reading the notes real quick. You know what I just thought about, and I'm just a consummate entrepreneur, and I think liberals will eat it up. Adult PE, and I know that they got health classes and Pilates and stuff, but like an adult PE where it's like at a certain time, 3 times a week, you go, you show up, there's like an instructor. You don't all have to do the same things, but you have to get, maybe there's a bracelet that monitors your level of action. I think that could be really fun. Anyway, I'm going to write that down, and some Jillian Jacobs lady is going to like take it and
brand it. Yeah.
But adult PE could be something dope, because I used to love PE.
Well, yeah. I mean, I was thinking about this too. This study is focused on young people, but 90% of this research applies to adults as well.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. I am overweight right now. I need that. So, most of America is overweight. So it is something that could definitely be used and needed.
Yeah. Especially coming out of the pandemic. Especially coming out of the pandemic. I think en masse Americans gained weight for sure. Omar, what's your quick, your big thoughts, your 30,000 foot view take on what we've talked about so far?
Yeah, man, I got a lot. So he's making a direct correlation, saying the reason that kids these days are so filled with anxiety is because they're not getting enough playtime outside. Okay. Yep. I mean, look, I'll go in 2 different directions, which is one, in a direction of saying, like, I can absolutely understand that and agree with that and go into that, and I will. On the other side, I'm going to be like, okay, homeboy, you're making a direct correlation between kids' anxiety and social levels based upon like outside play. Like, you can make the direct correlation that the amount of time that kids have on the phone, preoccupied with social status, preoccupied with likes, preoccupied with popularity, preoccupied with, I think, like whether or not they're getting along in their groups or not, which is, you know, age old history stuff, is also like the major cause of anxiety, right? Like, why are they not outside playing? Because they're on their phone. I will say this, and like this is kind of hinting towards like an affirmative. Have y'all ever read that book, Sapiens?
I remember Sapiens. I have to finish it. I know the notes of it. I know
I
the
haven't. You've
Yeah,
talked
man.
about it
Yeah.
before, but I haven't read it. Yeah.
I talk about it a lot, man. It's a hell of a book. So Yuval Noah Harari wrote a book called, and I hope I didn't butcher that name, an amazing book called Sapiens, right? And like the basic premise of the book is that as humans, we have through millions of years evolved into several different habits. So, you know, here's like a quick, easy explanation of it. It's like, hey man, like why do humans have trouble like with bread and consuming bread? Why do humans have an easier time consuming things like vegetables and even chicken over beef? And it's because millions upon millions of years, our bodies and our DNA have built up patterns based upon the millions of years of evolution in human beings. Like as human beings got more adept to eat, you know, certain diets, the body started adapting to that diet. So like our body is an adept to eating processed foods. That's why we're getting, you know, obesity rates. Our bodies are more adept to wake up in the morning, right, when the sun rises, and go to bed when the sun goes down, right? Because millions of years, like there was no such thing as electricity. So within that context, I really wanted to get deep into this because the idea of being outside, getting vitamin D, exercising, getting those endorphins going, like there's not a science on the planet that hasn't said exercise is good for you. Exercise is good to get that vitamin D. Exercise is good to get those endorphins. Exercise is good for your brain waves. Exercise is good to get better sleep. Exercise is good in order to, you know, let out stress. Exercise is good in order to get your heart rate up, which then increases like things like serotonin going through your body, right? Like all of our body is built in a way where exercise and being out in the sun yields a positive. So that alone already will explain a ton of like, hey man, why are people so damn grumpy? And it's like, well, your sleep is shit because you're staying indoors all the time, because you're not exercising, because you're not getting your heart rate up and your endorphins aren't going up. Hey man, like this may be a bit controversial, right? Like there are these really interesting patterns that we're seeing demographically where kids these days are having much less sex. And it's interesting, it's weird, and we're like, okay, what's going on with that?
Well,
like,
I
think
can
make a direct correlation.
On that note, so here's what he's arguing here. This is like the social media piece where, and I think I know where he's going, right? He's basically saying the data
more your ass
around
outside touching grass, the less you are worried about these other things or on the screen.
Well, that too. But what he's also saying is he's not necessarily making a case for exercise. He's making a case for unstructured, independent, self-directed playtime. Exactly.
Right.
But
what I'm directly
saying, and that's typically when those things when young people would be engaged in, you know,
socialization,
sexual activities. Right. Exactly.
Right. But like, here's what I'm getting at. I absolutely understand what he's getting at. I read the notes and everything even before we got into before I got into the studio. I'm taking a different angle and saying I have a certain level of agreement in that like structured play is so healthy for kids. I'm taking it a step back and even saying unstructured play is exercise. And kids are not getting exercise. And like even Doc was like, hey man, like how about like a PE class, right? Like even for adults. Like I get it. What I'm going into is saying even just the act of going outside and playing is going to induce all of these things, right? Like you're getting endorphins, you're socializing with other people, you're getting vitamin D, and it's all kind of related on this take that Harari made in Sapiens. You add the element now of unstructured play, right? And the use of imagination, the use of making up rules. Remember, we used to make up games all the time, dude, and we'd make up rules all the time. And then like
That's
someone would
that's
make
what he's
that
talking
rule.
about right here
You
in
are
this
arguing
paragraph.
exactly what the man said. You are making the man's
Exactly.
Yeah, he's like that.
reality.
Unstructured time is where you learn those negotiation skills, socialization.
You deal
those
with
are-
you deal with fights and bullying and
Mhm.
social
Exactly.
strata and like things of
Exactly.
that nature. And right now everything is behind the screen. But look, like I mean, we can all get professorial, like and like dive into it, right? And like, okay, like I don't know if it's one of those articles, our son where we like, nah, let's see the veracity of this topic. But I think we all can agree, like there's something different about the way we used to just let kids go outside and play. Like
Sure.
if you told a group of kids, if any of our youth and ages go outside and play, we don't need more direction than that. I think that there are some places, and I think culturally now, if you just told some of these kids now to just go outside and play, they're gonna look at you and be like, I don't know what you mean. Like, you mean take my am I taking like my tablet? Am I taking my Nintendo with me? Like, what am I doing? Right? Am I taking my phone? And I think just the larger thing of like this free play, this free association, everything that Omar said, like, how do you help? Has childhood just changed? Is childhood just different now than what it was like that than it's kind of always been? I mean, I don't want us to sound like some crazy people saying it's the end of the world, blah, 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 all that. But I get the simple notion that Mr. Gray or Dr. Gray is making just around like, look, there are skills that come from just being able to interact, play, be social beings and social creatures. How do you get back to that if things have been so different, so fraught, so, overly supervised, like how do you, I'm not, and also I'm not the parent that's on here. And Omar, you're not a parent. Like David, how was it different for you as a parent? You know what I'm saying? Like you grew up, you were a 70s kid? Like you was outside playing in the 80s, the 70s? Like I don't know I don't want to age you, brother, but I feel like your parents just had
you
outside.
Yeah.
I feel like your parents just had you outside. I feel like
I mean that's
seatbelts.
yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like
yeah, no, it was definitely before seatbelts.
Get in the back of the truck.
And literally like outside, ever since I think starting in kindergarten, I used to walk to school both ways, right? And literally walk to school, 12 years of walking to school, occasional ride here and there, but my parents worked and we always lived close to the school. And then that meant like sometimes after school, we didn't go directly home. Oftentimes we'd go hang out at a friend's house, or we'd go, hike in a canyon, or, we'd get into some shit, that's how you learn. As a young person, you learn like what's okay and what's not okay to do. And you learn things are not okay when something bad happens to you, right? Like you get involved with the police, or you get, involved in a physical, in a fight, and you're on the losing end of that, right? Or something, but that's how I learned limits. That's how I learned how to negotiate like social situations, by just being out in the world, literally. And
how to talk to girls.
all that, and I think for us coming home was like, we'd start working our way closer to home. And then all of a sudden, when I could like literally smell the beans or the pollo or the arroz, coming out of the house, I'm like, that's dinner's almost ready. Then you go in. But yeah, it was fundamentally a different time. And again, I don't, I've seen different studies. I don't think 2024 is much more, probably less dangerous to be a young person, because now we do have things like seatbelt laws. We have drug education. We have sex education, right? There's actually a lot more.
You have cameras everywhere. There are
cameras everywhere. Yeah,
everywhere.
But the worst thing, I think the parents' worst nightmare is that your child's going to be kidnapped, right? That's like the worst thing. And I don't even think that is like worse today than it was, 30 or 40 years ago. But we structured.
Well, no, statistically, it's gotten significantly better, which look, that could be argumentative, right? Like
Yeah.
in
It's a
terms of
perception, though.
right, the kidnappings have gone down like exponentially, but is that a direct result of like kids no longer, you know, playing in the street and kind of out on their own and like very latchkey style, right? And you know, like Chris Rock made a joke about that shit, right? Like it used to be like you could play around the block, and then like you got older and like things got a little worse, and it's like, okay, you can go to this end to this end, you know,
Yeah.
and then it's like you go to this side of this yard. Like by the time that motherfucker's 12, he's just hopping around in a circle. I think that, like, I will say this, and I kind of side with Bill Maher on this a lot. Like, I think America has had this like ludicrous tendency to overcorrect.
Mm-hmm.
And I also think it depends on like your community, right? So this past weekend, I was actually out in my brother-in-law's community, which is Auburn, California, which is just north of Sacramento. And we were partaking in all sorts of stuff. I was up there for all sorts of reasons. But like one thing that struck me during one of their like really fun celebratory days, which is called like Pioneer Days, right? Like it's badass. Like the whole town comes out, they've got a parade, everyone is out for this thing, like, and it all like culminates in a park and everyone's just like partying and having a really good time. Well, dude, like I saw and noticed things because I'm just like weirdly observant about kids in the community during that day and during that time. And like I saw a bunch of things. One thing I saw, not a person on their phone. Not a kid, not a teenager, not a 20-year-old. And I'm looking at the young people, right? Like I'm looking at everybody, but like I was particularly kind of aghast that like, whoa, dude, like even the young people have all their stuff put away. They were out there, you know, if they were over 21, they were partying and drinking, but not on their phones. People were just passing around babies and shit. Like they brought their babies to this like celebration and like everyone knew the baby because it was like a small town. So everyone's just like passing around and taking care of the baby, right? And like no one was worried about like, oh my God, the baby's going this way or germs or this. It was this really fascinating look at a community who didn't spend a moment of their time in those days that I was there on the phone, on a computer, on a tablet, playing video games. They were out doing the things that we were doing when we were kids. And it was this like instantaneous kind of flashback, not just to our childhood, but like a community that has kind of embraced the idea that we're going to raise each other and look out for each other as a community. But this community believes in outdoor play. This community believes in kind of like, hey man, you get, you know, you fall, you put some dirt onto it kind of thing. Like, yeah, you go back home, we'll put some ointment, but like, you're not crying back home because you got, you know, your knee scraped. Mm-hmm. No one was on the phone. Everyone's outside hanging out in the pool. And the community culture was one in which this was celebrated. So, you know, this kind of leads into a totally different direction of like, you live in the city. Is this your reality, or is this an offshoot of people that are living in a more rural area? And are we creating even a greater divide amongst your urban and rural, because the rural is having this free play, is having this built of imagination, is doing all the things that are inside the article and developing this like sense of independence. And are we debilitating our kids in the city because we're afraid to let them go outside and play? That's a huge question for our audience that I'd love to hear.
But that's
your opinion.
That's this question right here. That's for us in the audience. This is exactly where we're going. So we can veer from the question, but I think it's the same spirit. In what ways can schools and parents foster an environment that encourages independent play and its benefits for mental well-being? And then the edit to this is what you said, which I was going to bring up. How does that look in inner city versus in suburban or rural America? Because those environments are very, I mean, even the resources that the schools have are different. And then the neighborhoods in inner city are different and may not be the safest spaces compared to
100%.
Auburn, California, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
exactly.
Yeah, if anybody in the audience has ideas, I mean, I think we had a great comment here from Nicole. Absolutely. I mean, you could be in deep East Oakland and within 10 minutes, you could be in Joaquin Miller Park, which is essentially like a redwood forest. But like if people don't know that it's there or they don't have access and know how to get there, I have thoughts and ideas on this. I'll go first.
Yeah, please.
I think
what she responded to with an answer. I know you was asking for answers.
Yeah, by joining in on the fun and games. Yeah. Yep. Yeah, there you go. So I think the one thing that we learned from, I mean, not just the pandemic, but I think building, smaller communities. I'm thinking about going back to the days of the Black Panthers and the Brown Berets, when people formed communities around a particular cause, right? And one of those causes was like the well-being of young people. And then, fast forward, they had independent schools. Now they call them micro schools or whatever, right? Or home schools. And the pandemic hits, and then many people were we were all forced to do things differently, but like we were forced to go into micro communities, right? So I formed a homeschool at my home for family and for some children in the neighborhood. So we formed a smaller unit, right? And we got the kids out and they had unstructured playtime, all this stuff. We went to Joaquin Miller Park once a week. And so I think if parents are not able to do it because of demands on work, there are other creative ways to build a community to leverage, people that maybe can support young people, around, creating these like spaces for kids to go out into the world and explore, obviously to be safe, but to get out and have spaces to interact with one another. So that's a great comment. I'll let you guys chime in on that. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'll go briefly. I think, I mean, if we're talking about this for like kids and community, whether it's in, rural or I lived in both cities and I've lived in, suburb, rural type situations. I mean, you adapt. Like, I mean, they still were playing, in the streets back then or whatever, but I get it. If you have to, if that's something you want for your household, if you're a parent, then you got to like make that happen. I mean, listen, I get this kind of new age parenting, and I don't want to talk too big with my chest puffed out too much because I'm not a parent, but I do feel like there's just an awful, you talk about the overcorrection, Omar, like there's a lot of us where our parents told us kids are to be seen and not heard. And now there are a lot of parents that do a lot of over negotiating with their kids. Like, I don't know if that's fully the answer. I think that you should be in conversation. But sometimes you got to tell your kid to turn that shit off and go outside, man. Like sometimes you got to be like, yo, like if you're in a family that likes to grill, the father or the mother that likes to grill is going to go out and grill. And like the kid is going to be there. Like, like when I mean, you went to Joshua Tree with your family, right? Like that wasn't a negotiation. I mean, maybe it was with your wife, but it was like, all right, kid, we're going somewhere. You live here. You're going.
Yeah.
Like it's not a discussion. We have to get back to valuing those things. Like, and when you talk about the cities, man, as somebody who grew up in Oakland but was from Chicago, I didn't appreciate Chicago's parks until I was an adult and I was visiting here. Like Chicago has some incredible parks. And if you go, especially in autumn, see for my California friends, autumn is a season between summer. It is a beautiful season, but those parks are beautiful when they're golden brown and everything is changing and you get a crisp wind on your face. Like, just sitting outside and like reading a book and just taking in that sunlight. I think those are things that you have to prioritize it. You have to go out with your, like when somebody said, go out with your kids, like go out with your family, be outside. I don't love outside either, but I do have like a nice outside area here that I've done the show from a few times. So, get some sun, man, touch some grass, let the sun touch your face. It won't hurt you.
Look at this section from the article. Between 1950 and 1990, schools added more hours. By 1990, the school year is 5 weeks longer, right? And the days are longer. You started seeing homework for elementary school kids who didn't have before. There was far less competition and worrying about grades back then. The combined result is that we've gradually increased what I call the weight of school and the amount of time children spend on it. Is that a slap in the face to everything that we talk about on this show?
I mean, it can be, but it depends on how you take it.
Isn't that fascinating?
I'll give my take on this like happy horse shit ideology of like the olden days, right? Like, fuck them olden days, dude. All right, like 1950, segregation still existed. All right, like everyone's sitting here talking about the good old days and shit. Let me tell you what happened between then and now is that women got into the workforce. You have a lot of single parent families. You've got dual working families. And you know what? Like our parents need our kids to stay in our schools so that they can have a place to be. So they ain't out there running around for 3 months by themselves in the middle of the summer. What I will say to this is that schools need to have the adaptation because what I think schools are doing, and I'm right now developing the plan for our elementary school. We're going to build an elementary school in the next 2 years here in El Paso. And one of the most fundamental components that I have in here from grades kinder through 5 is a literal block of time for unstructured play, mandatorily. See, when you're asking the second question, what can schools do to foster an independent playtime? Schools are going in the wrong fucking direction, dude. Like, I'm all for literacy. I am all for those kids learning how to read. But then it becomes the math test, and it becomes the English test, and it becomes the weight of the school is borne in by acquiescence to the state and these state tests and shit. And I'm like, you know what, man, like chill out on that shit right there, because I understand we all have obligations, but like you're going to make a child neurotic if you're not giving them the time to like at least get out their steam, independent play, figure things out for themselves. And then I get it. These kids come to you and they're like, well, what are the rules? What are we supposed to do? And it's like, figure it out. And time after time, kids are extraordinarily adaptive. They figure it out. They realize, you know what, the end of the world ain't gonna come. We got people looking over us, and we have this time to develop rules, ideas, fixtures for games, deal with things that are very, I would arguably say, safe because it's under the supervision of the school, but also in a way that's like a little fun and dangerous. And it's like, it's not all structured. It's not all commanded. It's not all done. And that is something that we deeply need, because therein lies imagination. And imagination is a radically powerful component to a child's well-being and the development of the child. Because the minute we start diminishing like imagination, dude, like I always say this, like America and the United States has one central thing that is always going to be its economic pivot. It is imagination. We invented things, man. Like regardless of who invented it, right?
Are you talking about those good old days that you just poo-pooed on? You know?
No, man. I'm talking.
I'm
talking. We invented Google. We invented Apple. Like we invented the laptop.
We invented the internet,
the computer. Yeah. Yes. Like these are all things that America's invented because there was a certain level of both imagination and economic support. That's a really good elixir.
We were the first to go to the moon.
I mean, come on now, right? Yeah. And a lot of this is born and bred from developing the imagination as a child. And if we're not allowing for that at the house because things are dangerous, then by all means, the school needs to do that. So take it from a guy who runs schools, who understands the politics of schools. If I'm sitting here saying every single day, kids are going to have a slotted time of unstructured play, it is deeply necessary for the neurological development of a child to have those things. And if the community ain't going to have it, the school should have it. But like, that's a good ass question. Like, what can parents do and what can the community do, especially if you don't have like all the like money in the world to take your kid to some like nice vacation? What are some other strategies?
Let me tell you. So 2 things. One, let me first make a comment about schools because of what I just saw in Oakland on a campus. And then 2, even under the welfare system, like what we had in the housing project in Kentucky where I live with my grandmother. So first, I will shoot schools a little bit of bail. Like we did this event in West Oakland on the old Lafayette campus where KIPP is now at. And you know, it's a beautiful park attached to the school. It's the city's park, but it's attached to the school. But kids can't play there because there are encampments, and there are encampments that that are built on top, like that are built connected to the school building. So kids are walking into school and there are homeless encampments, like where people are cooking and using the bathroom and all kind of craziness like that. And because of California politics, you cannot just remove those people. Now, listen, I am somebody who grew up homeless. I have a huge heart for the homeless. It is something that I'm very passionate about. And you can't build an encampment at a school or a church. Like you can't do it. Like, and so that's one I just wanted to name, especially in places like California, Bay Area, where things are getting a little crazy. David knows what I'm talking about. It's hard to walk down the street.
Oh yeah.
2, I lived in this place called Lincoln Court in Paducah, Kentucky with my grandmother. And they had parks and recs, like it was the housing authority, right? So for y'all that don't know, when they say, what does those liberal laws do or whatever, one of the things is they create housing authorities that create projects of low income where you can be, but they also are in charge of making sure kids are entertained in the summer, that we eat. So in the morning, in the summer, you are out the house at 8 a.m. The first truck, the breakfast truck comes and you go and you line up and you get breakfast, and they hire teenagers to be like almost like camp instructors. And we do activities and you play. And then at lunchtime, the lunch truck comes, and they did that so it could take the burden off of families to have to provide these huge, breakfasts and lunches. And look, the sandwiches weren't gourmet, but now looking back, I can look at that program. I learned so many games. I learned, line dancing. I learned these silly little, different cultures and how they played and things like that. I think that but that was a concerted effort. And I think that when you talk about a concerted effort, what does that look like? And people have to be bought in. Everybody got the memo in that community. Send your kid outside at 8 o'clock. And to the point where if you weren't outside, you felt punished. You felt like you were in trouble if you couldn't go outside and be with your friends. And I think right now it's the opposite. So I think you can reinstate things like that, make it cool, make it fun, feed some people, and let people know, their kids are going to be safe. I think parents would appreciate the reprieve to have their day back from 8 to 3 in the summer.
Yeah, this is another good quote from the article. I think it's what you were getting at. We talked about this on the show we did a couple of weeks ago on social media and cell phones. The majority of young people don't actually like it.
Yeah. Right.
And so I don't think they're on social media instead of getting together. They're on social media because they can't get together.
That's true, man. Yeah. Listen, man, there's a whole generation of young boys that have never had to, that like girls. I want to be inclusive, that have never had to approach a girl in person in their life. And it's something foreign. And it's something that we might joke about as an older generation, but they just are not exposed to it. That's why you see these weird interactions. And on the other side, that's why you see such strong interactions online, right? These parasocial relationships have taken a rise. And listen, man, there's some good in there. Like there's some good about places being connected and sharing of cultures. But you also see the same social mores happen. You see groupthink, you see bullying, and you see ganging up. Like everything that was a problem in person is an exacerbated problem online. People are killing themselves because of these things.
Exactly. You know how much harder it is to bully somebody in person than it is to bully them. Anybody can bully anybody online, but to bully somebody in person is a lot harder. And there are consequences to it, right? I think the school thing is tricky, but I think, like what Omar says, I definitely, I always protected, we had recess also. Recess for me was we're not doing, there's no structured stuff at recess. We're going to have supervision, and it'll be safe for kids, but we're going to let the kids go out, put some balls over here, put some jump ropes over here.
And that's all you had to do.
Yeah. I mean, literally cardboard boxes, let the kids build little structures or an imagination playground, right? But just get out of their way and let them interact with one another. They obviously need to blow off steam, all that stuff. But there'd be times when, we'd be out on the yard, and I hate using that term, on the playground. And I'm like, where's I see Dr. Cole's class. I see Mr. Castillo's class. I don't see Mr. Yunar's class. Mr. Yunar is still doing a lesson. I go in and I'm like, shut it down. Let your kids out.
Mhm.
You know, they need that time. And I would walk the hall and I would say like, we're going, come on, let's go. Everybody outside. And we really believed in that. And this is why.
It's a
But I
part
do
of
think
development. You need to fall
Yeah.
and scrape your knee. You need to get those
Sure.
scars. You need to play on the structures and have a disagreement. And you know, this is where you start to develop as a person. Like,
Yeah.
who are you in this and when these things are happening?
And I will tell you, Omar, you're planning to open an elementary school in El Paso. You know, when young people have conflict, thinking specifically about like 6, 7, 8-year-olds, it's so natural to have conflict. Conflict is just part of relationship building and awareness and limits. It's not the kids that it's hard to like, you know, de-escalate. It's when the parents get involved.
Correct.
Because then the parents come in and they apply this like adult mind frame to it with all of their fears and their, you know, it's their anxiety, right? I'm like, they're children. What you think happened didn't actually happen the way that you thought it happened. It was just two kids that bumped heads and somebody said something to somebody else. Somebody said something back. And I'm like, this is not about Barack Obama or Donald Trump. I'm sorry.
It's just not about Barack Obama.
Calm down.
Thanks, Barack. I think like, again, I'm no parent, right? But I've been around a lot of parents now that we've been running the schools. And I got to say that, like, I think I'm lucky in that a lot of our parents have an immense amount of trust in what we do. Because I see a lot of this helicopter parent situation, right? Like this is hovering at a radically different level than I've even seen with some of the millennials, where it's like the kid can't go anywhere without a constant level of supervision. And what's worse is the parents that are giving these kids the phone early on. They're like in elementary school, they're in early middle school running around with a phone, parent checking in on them all the time. That's like that is the immovable object next to like, you know, the unbreaking force, right? You've got the parent who is constantly harboring, and that causes a problem because then we're allowing for these things to happen in school and the parents simply saying like, hey, like my kid got into this, and then they get into it with other parents and then they make it into a melodrama. And I'm like, hey, like this ain't the Real Housewives or whatever the fuck town you live in, and you want to like live in that reality. You need to like chill the shit out, because your desire to make drama is teaching that child this is how to create conflict resolution. And I've got a huge issue with kids seeing how over involved and overprotective parents resolve issues, because it is now an exasperation of a problem that already exists, right? Then they're constantly checking in on the phone, but then the phone becomes a utility for the kid to like stay away from these social interactions. So I have a huge issue, I think, with over-involved parents, and that becomes part of the issue altogether. And I'm not telling any parent out there, don't take care of your kid or like let it go. I am saying that your over-involvement then creates what I've seen is this interesting dynamic. Listen, like we had a very different dynamic growing up. Like my mom was just like, I don't know where the child is. Like, so long as they're there, like by the time that it gets dark. And like my mom didn't give like a rat's ass, dude. Like from the moment that sun went up to the moment the sun went down, she had no idea where the hell it was. That was maybe a little too liberal, right? Was
it? I mean, you're a Harvard graduate that runs the school now. Pretty well world-traveled young man. Like, I mean, I think you came out okay. I don't know.
I think we came out okay. What I'm getting at is that to our parents in the audience, I want to make sure that they have at least someone sharing with you it's okay to let go a little bit. It's okay for your kid to get that knee scaped. It's okay for that kid to try to resolve that situation with another kid without you getting directly involved. It's okay for your kid to learn problem-solving skills. You don't have to come to the rescue every single time. You also don't need to like get the kid into a situation where they know that you'll get them out of anything. And that's another issue, because when the kid feels that they can go to the parent to get them out of every single issue, this is why you've got like huge issues in college and thereafter. Kids getting into all sorts of really ridiculous scenarios, man, like drug issues, DWI issues, car issues, like treating people inappropriately. And then they're like, well, dude, my parents always fix everything. So you've now like totally disabled the child because their attitude
Affluenza has entered the chat.
is mom and dad. Always gonna like solve shit.
Affluence is one hell of a drug.
Affluence is a hell of a drug. Even poor, but that's the thing. Even poor people. I mean, even poorer people, right? Like can afford to have affluenza now.
The mindset,
And I think it's just interesting, man. Like, and it's inevitable. We're gonna have to do the show, Omar, about why we don't have kids, because I know that there's all these studies that tribes of color are producing less children, and white people producing less children. Actually, I think brown folks are actually the only ones that's on track. I think that's why there's all this replacement theory stuff. But I get blamed a lot because I'm black and we're still 12% of the population, and I don't have kids. But I think there's a bunch of reasons. But no, man, just for my final thought on this, man, I think, like we overcorrect. We definitely overcorrect. And I think that right now, the ruling group that's aging out those boomers, those young folks who were the years of love in the 60s and in early 70s, I think they lived them a life. I think they have some regrets. I think that they run the country now. And I think that they're like, no, don't let those kids stay out. You need to put them in or do this. I think is what Omar said earlier, and what everybody said. We overcorrect in this country, and I think that there are generations of people, and we just go through cycles, and we all repeat the cycle. We are all the rebel when we're younger, and we all become the police when we get older. The more bills you got, and the more things at risk you got. I think that the economy plays a lot into it, but while economic differences are huge, I'll end on this. What poverty is today in America is different than what poverty was in America 20, 30 years ago, and it's still different than what it is in third world countries. We are a first world country with first world like poverty, meaning that a lot of our poor people still have like $1,000 cell phones, still have access to information kind of all over the place. And I think we do see a bunch of overcorrection, but we need a 2 or 3 hour show to just kind of go into those depths. But good topic, David. Thanks for bringing it up.
Yeah. Omar, closing thoughts. Are you ready?
Yeah, of course. The fixture of just simply being able to go outside. How many adults are going outside? Like how many, right? And then I think you brought up something very interesting about this like negotiation with kids. And it's like, well, buddy, do you want to go outside today? It's like fucking buddy doesn't want to go outside if they've got the choice between playing PlayStation. Like, sorry, buddy, we're taking you outside. And it's going to suck for a little bit until you realize how much fun it is to interact with other kids, how much fun it is to get into the river, how much fun it is. Like, my God, dude, like how many times that we forced my goddaughter, Lucia, or my goddaughter, Alea, out. And it was kicking and screaming at first. And then all the fun stories resulted from like that hike. All the fun moments resulted from that time together. The bonding that happened between like not just kids, but kids and adults, because we were actually having a conversation and no one's on their phone and interacting. Like the ramifications are huge. But I think my one final statement is just like negotiating with children. Children in schools, I'm always believing should have some level of choice, but that choice is simply like, do you want to finish this task or do you want to go clean up the cafeteria? Both of them are going to be really good for you. To negotiate with a child and be like, well, buddy, should we just stay at home and play video games or do you want to go outside? I think that we need to have a more enthusiastic group of parents who are more enthusiastic themselves about going outside and actually having a conversation with your kid and interacting with them like a normal human being, than allowing them to dictate what is going to happen in the day. And for God's sakes, have a little bit of foresight and do some planning guarantee you, the kid, and the family will be all the much better for taking some time outside.
Boom. Yeah. So I think, regarding the school piece, I'm drawn to my time that I spent as the head of school at Urban Montessori in Oakland, California. It's Oakland's only one of the few Bay Area even public Montessoris. And so we, in the Montessori environment, you have a work period, which is essentially like a 3 or 3.5 hour block of time from the start of the school day through about lunchtime. And students had a work plan, even as young as like kindergartners, right? First graders, second graders, all the way up. They had a work plan. There were works around the classroom. We didn't have assigned seating. There were structured parts of the morning, but most of it was unstructured, but it was still managed, and there was some accountability built in for, like how children were using their time. But like you could actually, the young people could actually choose to do a math work, a language work, a geography work, different types of, a science work, right? Whatever they were ready for, whatever the next lesson was that they were ready for, they would get a small lesson from their teacher. Then they would be able to go and engage in activities based on that lesson without any teacher oversight. Teacher was supervising. And I mean, you can do that in the classroom. It doesn't have to happen outside, but you can set up those environments where young people can actually struggle through, decision making and conflict. We had a lot of conflict. We had like 28 kids in a classroom, and we only had like 15 chairs. There was pillows, there was rugs. So, it's just part of growing up, and we didn't see conflict as a bad thing. I think getting into like middle and high school, we think about like direct instruction and how kind of crazy that sounds. But within schools, what it could look like is like backing off and moving to like a PBL, a project-based learning model, where, students can work in teams to solve problems. And the teacher is no longer the sage on the stage, but the guide on the side, right? And so I think within the school world, there's definitely ways to provide opportunities for that to happen. I think outside, and I know it's more challenging in like, places like East Oakland, or I'm sure in Chicago or in Detroit or in Philly or in New York, versus rural or suburban America, to have safe spaces for young people to have free unstructured time. But I still think there's a way. And again, going back to the idea of forming like smaller learning or play communities, or a pod, the concept of the pod, right? So figure out, who's in your neighborhood, what children, connecting with families that your children attend school with, and create those opportunities, right? I mean, the idea of the pod, I think, should still be continued, post pandemic, right? Kids should still be able to get together and go out and do things, especially if they may live in an area where, may not be as safe as we would like it to be. But we can't change that. Anyhow, love the comments today. Lonzo, thanks for chiming in. Nicole, thank you as well. Toya, thank you so much. And and good conversation. So
Maritza was in here earlier. Thank you for being here, Miss Maritza.
Yeah, we saw Maritza in here earlier as well.
Yeah.
That's right. All right. Well, on that note, and we're going to close out with this quote: "Play makes children happy and resilient. We've been taking play away from children." Right. So let's just think about that at the big picture. Thank you for tuning in. South Star Classroom, episode 144. And we'll be back next week. Thanks, everybody.
Have a good one.